Well, hello everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of NASCAR Mount Rushmore. We're back on schedule after Vegas, Phoenix, so expect these videos roughly around this time every week. But this week for NASCAR Mount Rushmore, we are doing Martinsville Speedway, a very historic track. NASCAR has been going there for over 75 years at this point, so there was a lot of players to choose from to make this Mount Rushmore. But let me know your thoughts on who's on your Martinsville Speedway Mount Rushmore. But let's start to go through my Mount Rushmore of Martinsville Speedway, the paperclip, the short track. I still don't like that nickname, the short track. I like the paperclip, but nonetheless, here is the Mount Rushmore for Martinsville Speedway. And the first driver I have to put on this Mount Rushmore, I would also consider to be the GOAT of Martinsville Speedway, one of the greatest drivers in NASCAR history. I think a lot of people would probably have this driver pegged as the number one driver in NASCAR history. Me personally, I would not. So you might know who I'm actually talking about, and that would be Richard Petty, the King. Richard Petty has 15 wins. Let me say that again. 15 wins for the King at the paperclip. 30 top fives, 37 top tens, and 2,823 laps led. I think there's definitely an argument to be made that this might have been the King's best racetrack. He was phenomenal here. He had more wins than everybody else on the all-time wins list by at least 4. Obviously, the next driver on that all-time win list will be on this list. So if you know your history, you already know who I'm talking about for that driver. But Richard Petty, what else can I say? He's the King. He's probably a Mount Rushmore driver in the history of NASCAR. He's going to be on a lot of these lists. He's already made a couple of appearances, and he's going to make probably a couple of more appearances on some of these Mount Rushmores. But Richard Petty was phenomenal here. With all those wins, I'm surprised he doesn't have more laps led. Out of the 4 drivers I actually have on this Mount Rushmore, 2,823 laps led by Richard Petty is actually the least amount compared to the other 3 drivers on my Mount Rushmore. And I should probably start naming those drivers. My second driver on this Mount Rushmore, I would personally consider to be the second best driver in NASCAR history, and he's constantly showing up on these Mount Rushmores. He probably had the most appearances so far out of these videos I've done, and that would be Jeff Gordon. Jeff Gordon has 9 wins at the paperclip, 29 top 5s, 38 top 10s, and 3,779 laps led. Insane stats from Jeff Gordon. Not a very big surprise. All-time lap leader, all-time in top 10s, second in top 5s, third in wins. I think there is a debate that Jeff Gordon could also potentially been the GOAT of Martinsville Speedway, but 15 wins versus 9 wins. I had to take the 15 with Richard Petty. But Jeff Gordon's had some great moments here, including at one point, I remember one of these races, he came down for like a couple laps down and still went on to win the race. Jeff Gordon was always just so phenomenal at Martinsville Speedway. And another driver that was phenomenal at Martinsville Speedway, and this might have been also his best racetrack, and I'm talking about Jaws, DW, Darrell Waltrip. Darrell Waltrip had 11 victories at Martinsville Speedway, 27 top 5s, 31 top 10s, and 3,617 laps led at the short track. Yeah, DW had a lot of great moments at this racetrack. One of my moments I remember as a kid, because DW was past his prime when I was a kid, but I remember him racing that Toyota number 17 once Toyota first got in to NASCAR, and him driving that around Martinsville Speedway in the truck series. He always just seemed so fond of Martinsville Speedway, and it was probably his best racetrack. I do expect DW to be on some more Mount Rushmores for other tracks that I do this for, but Darrell Waltrip, he's one of the GOATs. I'd probably put him in the top 10 best NASCAR drivers of all time, and he ended up making it onto this Mount Rushmore for Martinsville, and he's arguably the second or the third best driver in Martinsville Speedway's history. And that leads us to our fourth and final driver on our Mount Rushmore. And there was only really two drivers I was debating on this last spot. A couple of those drivers that I do think could potentially be on the Mount Rushmore at some point would be Denny Hamlin and William Byron. I think at one point, one of those drivers could potentially end up on the Mount Rushmore for Martinsville Speedway. Maybe even a driver like Ryan Blaney could potentially end up on the Mount Rushmore for Martinsville at one point. But the two drivers I was really debating between, one of them was Fred Lorenzen, which a lot of people probably don't even know, but he raced not a lot of races here and I think let me pull up the stats. I have them right here in front of me just to make sure I get this right. But Fred Lorenzen had 17 races at Martinsville Speedway, won 6 times. And in those 17 races, he led 2,731 laps. He almost led as many laps as Richard Petty at Martinsville Speedway. So it was tough for me to keep him off the list. But he is the fifth. If there was a fifth spot on the Mount Rushmore, it would go to Fred. But instead, it will go to Jimmy Johnson. Superman, JJ, gets the last spot on the Mount Rushmore with 9 wins, 19 top 5s, 25 top 10s, and 2,932 laps led. Another reason why I really wanted to put Jimmy on this list is his teammate sharing similar, if not the same equipment, was Jeff Gordon. So these two had to go head-to-head. I think they had their slight beef at Martinsville as well. They had to go head-to-head at this racetrack. So Jimmy could have gotten more wins. Jeff could have got more wins. So these two competing at this racetrack for a number of years makes it look even better than the stats are. But I had to give the last spot to JJ, Jimmy Johnson, to make the Mount Rushmore. But let me know your thoughts. Who would you put on your Mount Rushmore for Martinsville Speedway? Just to go through my Mount Rushmore one more time, I have Richard Petty, the king, and I also consider him the GOAT of Martinsville Speedway. I have Jeff Gordon, I have DW, and I have Jimmy Johnson on my Mount Rushmore for Martinsville Speedway. But once again, let me know your Mount Rushmore of Martinsville Speedway in the comments. Also, give me your thoughts on my Martinsville Mount Rushmore in the comments. Please like, comment, subscribe, share, do whatever you got to do. But for now, I'm Trackside Larry saying peace.